More than a year later, new arrest. How the investigation into the violence in Charlottesville led the FBI to Southern California. And hundreds turn out for a listening session on sexual abuse put on by the Catholic Diocese.
They have the funding and the availability. What we need is bold leadership and action to tackle the homeless crisis.
I've also been known as the most progressive in terms of criminal justice reform in the state of California.
Bonnie Dumanis and Nathan Fletcher talk with KPBS News about the issues they're focused on in the race for county supervisor.
We depend on just a few storms to generate most of our water supply, and if those storms don't track into the lower part of California, then we end up dry.
And weather experts give us details on what's been an especially dry year for San Diego. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebone Monet. 4 men from California have been arrested and charged with taking part in violent demonstrations last year in Charlottesville, Virginia. The FBI announced the arrest today, and the 4 men made their initial court appearances this afternoon. Search warrants were carried out this morning in the LA area. The FBI claims the men are part of a white supremacist group called the Rise Above movement and were among the most violent at the Charlottesville protests. The men are also accused of taking part in violent rallies last year in Huntington Beach and Berkeley. Hundreds of people filled a Catholic church in University City last night. They were there for a listening session by the Roman Catholic Diocese on sex abuse. As John Sepulveda of KQED News reports, it was the first of several forums.
The bishop is responding to criticism that the diocese tried to shield priests from facing allegations of sex abuse in the past. The diocese recently released the names of 8 priests who, according to the church, face credible allegations of abuse, the most recent being in 2002. As the bishop explained this, he in turn got an earful from parishioners who were upset of what they repeatedly called, quote, a subculture of homosexuality. And let's be clear here, there are no credible studies or research showing any sexual orientation is connected to potential for abuse. Yet, the parishioners repeatedly and consistently asked the bishop to keep gay priests from working and to reiterate that the only sexual activity allowed by the church is between a man and a woman during marriage. Bishop McElroy refused to condemn LGBTQ people and would not promise to keep gay priests from serving in the church. As questions and answers wound down, one woman asked the bishop whether he would be willing to reinstitute teachings about sex approved by Pope John Paul II. The bishop noted that those teachings weren't particularly effective then and would be even less so now. What he did not say is that the last credible allegation of abuse in San Diego County came during John Paul II's papacy. For KPBS News, I'm John Sepulveda.
A bill vetoed by Governor Jerry Brown would have expanded the amount of time sex abuse victims could sue a third party. The current law is 26 years. The bill from San Diego Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher would have pushed the limit to 40 years. The lawsuit would be limited to those who could have stopped the abuse. Governor Jerry Brown vetoed a similar bill in 2013. He explained the latest veto by saying there comes a time when an individual or organization should be secure in the reasonable expectation that past acts are indeed in the past and not subject to further lawsuits. A Pentagon study shows a high risk for sexual assault at military stations around the country, including some in San Diego. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh talked to one local expert who says it's more than just a lack of training, it's a problem with culture.
A new study by the RAND Corporation confirms the Navy has among the highest rate of sexual assault and harassment. Most of the worst offenders are on board ships. Carolyn Allard is a psychology professor at Alliant University For a decade, she worked with sexual trauma victims at the San Diego VA.
It just takes having to address each and every instance from the get-go, and very explicitly so, and publicly so, to start changing the culture and for people to get the idea that this is not going to be tolerated.
The Army and Navy have ordered follow-up studies to determine which installations to target. Allard said it isn't about sexual harassment training.
My guess is it'll be a cultural shift that needs to happen from the highest leadership down in terms of no tolerance and calling it out and accountability every step of the way.
Over 6,700 sexual assaults were reported to the Pentagon in 2017. That's nearly a 10% jump over 2016. Researchers attribute some of that to more victims being willing to come forward.
They're right that their rates, if they increase, they're just getting closer to the actual number because they're much higher than what they're able to find with their reporting rates.
Guys, let's go!
In the Marine Corps, 29 Palms was listed as one of the top 5 most dangerous places for both men and women. The study uses data from 2014. Researchers caution against using the numbers to determine which commands have the highest risk in 2018. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
Last month, Amazon's market cap reached $1 trillion. Now its workers are getting a raise. Today, the company announced all Amazon workers will be paid at least $15 an hour. That's more than double the federal minimum wage and higher than California's minimum wage of $11 an hour. The pay raise takes effect November 1st and will cover full-time, part-time, temporary, and seasonal workers. The United States-Mexico-Canada agreement is being touted as a win for the economies of North America. But as KPBS border reporter Jean Guerrero explains from Washington, experts say Mexico's small-scale farmers are getting the short end of the stick again.
After the original NAFTA was signed, the U.S. saw large waves of illegal immigration from Mexico. That's because Mexico's small farmers, or campesinos, couldn't compete with heavily subsidized agriculture in the U.S. Duncan Wood of the Wilson Center's Mexico Institute says the new treaty is great overall, but more of the same for Mexico's rural poor.
I don't see that the future of the Mexican campesino is going to be any better after this agreement. What has changed is that you now have a government in Mexico which is committed to providing support to workers in the fields, to small farmers.
Mexico's president-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador has promised to make the poor his priority. From Washington, Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
Election day is now just 5 weeks away. Tonight, we focus on races that will impact schools and growth. First, KPBS reporter Andrew Bowen sat down with Nathan Fletcher and Bonnie Dumanis, who are competing for San Diego County supervisor.
Bonnie Dumanis, Nathan Fletcher, thank you so much both for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
So San Diego County has a major housing shortage, and most experts agree that this is one of the reasons why this region is so unaffordable for people at many income levels. The Board of Supervisors just recently approved a development in undeveloped land in North County for more than 2,000 homes. Is this the kind of housing that you would support to help relieve the housing shortage? I'll start with you, Mr. Fletcher.
No, I think what we need to do instead of going into backcountry in areas that aren't consistent with our climate action plans and aren't consistent with fire protection or water or transit plans, I think the way we need to address our housing shortage is to take bold and decisive action to increase housing in the more urban areas, to do more infill, to do more transit-oriented development. We've talked about the creation of infrastructure financing districts. We've talked about the addition of auxiliary housing units. We've looked at really creative things we can do with county-owned property, with the resources they had. You know, let's not forget, this is a county board of supervisors that had $150 million to build a Charger Stadium. They have the funding and the availability. What we need is bold leadership and action to tackle the homeless crisis, because it's not just homeless who needs homes. There's working class folks, there's workforce housing. We have a real need, and it's going to take someone to really push them and lead them and drive them in a new direction to make that substantive change we need to address what is a very real problem.
Ms. Dumanis, homes in North County on undeveloped land, is this the kind of housing we need?
Well, I think we have a housing crisis. The urban core, I think, is a good place to start because you have livable, walkable communities. You're close to transit, so I think that's a good place to start. But for the county's land use is in the outer areas. So if we get 2,000 homes, I think that would be wonderful. But we have not enough homes to go around. That's what part of the reason why we have a homeless situation. And so I think we need to do a lot of different things. I think the county needs to step up more and be a leader in housing. I think that we need to put some money from the unreserved reserves and make sure that we help those that are doing affordable housing building with loans so they can leverage that. I think we need to streamline the process so that it doesn't cost as much. 40% of the cost of housing is those regulations, and that gets passed on to the consumer.
San Diego's homeless crisis does seem to be getting worse, and last year and part of this year it contributed to the deaths of 20 people from hepatitis A. What would you do on the Board of Supervisors to help relieve this homelessness crisis, Ms. Dumanis?
Well, I think that Hep A kicked us all in the butt, and that's why people started focusing on homelessness. And I think it's great that Dan Shea and Pete Seidler stepped up and made sure that they helped as well, and the city of San Diego. So we have some temporary shelter now, but I see after the crisis, it seems to be people more and more on the streets. So I think we have to look at, number one, the shelters as a first step, and then from there we need to have bridge housing, and then from there we need Housing First Plus. But we also have to recognize that there are people in the system that have mental health issues that we need to place into homes eventually that have wraparound services, and there's mental health money that we can use for those wraparound services. And I've been working in the homeless area. I've been working in San Diego for 35 years as a DA and a judge and as a prosecutor, and that's why Bob McElroy from Alpha Project and Father Joe are supporting me because of my experience with them on the homeless issues.
Mr. Fletcher, how do we fix this homelessness crisis?
Well, the county hasn't been getting it done. The simple reality is there's a crisis that has been building over years, and they've been asleep at the switch. For almost a decade, they were warned that you had a hepatitis crisis coming, and they didn't take action. A recent state audit showed they have about 1/2 the public health nurses they're required by law to have. And you have an all-5 Republican Board of Supervisors that's too busy voting themselves pay raises, offering money for stadiums, and investing in things that aren't helping the most vulnerable among us. Last year, we stood on the steps of the county and put out an emergency action plan. And standing with me was a coalition that included state leaders like Todd Gloria and city leaders like Chris Ward and Barbara Bree. It included folks from labor, business leader, community and faith leaders, and we called on the county to change their ways, to step out in a new direction, to be bold, to hire the public health nurses they need, to commit to building the permanent supportive housing that they need to have, to open the inpatient psychiatric beds that they're licensed and authorized to open at their Rosecrans facility, to be a better partner with the city. Just a few weeks ago, Chris Ward and I stood at a vacant county building in Hillcrest and called for a specific plan of action on a piece of property there that's been vacant for over a decade. They have fences around the facility, and they pay 24-hour security to stop homeless folks from climbing the fence and going into the building. We said, tear down the fence. Let's create a recuperative care center, a step-down facility. But there's been a lack of leadership, and that's what I think we need now more than ever. When I was in the state assembly, we showed we could lead, and things like Chelsea's Law got a lot of attention, but I did legislation on homeless youth to try and alleviate that burden and help them, and that's where we need a new generation. We need new ideas. We need someone who's going to really push them to be accountable and make a difference.
Mr. Fletcher, what do you think is the most important distinction between you and your opponent?
Well, I think it's this notion of change. Bonnie Dumanis has spent 30 or 40 years at the county, really does reflect, is supported by all 5 of the incumbent Republican supervisors, is part and parcel of what's been going on there. There's this great line that said the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. I wish 20 years ago the county would have been doing a lot of the things that now we say they need to do. I wish they would have been moving in a more progressive direction. I wish they would have invested more. I wish they would have taken a louder and stronger stand on things, and I think our region would be a better place. But I think in this election we have the opportunity to bring someone who has governing experience, who's shown legislatively we can tackle big, difficult issues and deliver solutions, who's shown that outside of office, whether it's helping mental health treatment for our veterans or our deported veterans. but who comes in with that energy and drive to say we're going to move in a more progressive direction, and we're going to lead, and we're going to work with the state, and we're going to drive solutions in a meaningful and accountable way. And so I think that we need a new voice at the county, and I think it's time, after the last 30 years, that we really start moving our region in a different direction.
Ms. Dumanis, what do you think is the most important distinction between you and your opponent?
Well, I think it's experience. I've been working in this county for 35 years. I've been the CEO of an organization that has a budget of $185 million. Employees, 1,000. I was the top law enforcement official in the county. And you know what? I don't even know how I got there. I was raised in a home that was a working class family. My dad was a truck driver. He was a teamster. My mom worked for WIC. I put myself through college. I put myself through law school. And I started out as a junior typist and rose through the ranks until I got to the deputy DA. I was elected as a judge, and then I was elected as DA. And not only DA, but the first openly gay DA in the nation, and the first woman and openly gay DA here in San Diego. I've also been known as the most progressive in terms of criminal justice reform in the state of California. We have implemented and actually done bold programs. So I've walked the walk. I know what it's like to pick up the pieces for victims. I know what it's like to change the criminal justice system and be progressive. And I know how to save lives. And that's what it's all about. And that's what makes me the best qualified candidate in this race.
Bonnie Dumanis, Nathan Fletcher, thank you both so much for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
4 candidates are running for 2 seats on the San Diego Unified School Board. KPBS education reporter Megan Burks introduces us to 2 of them.
A write-in candidate in June, businessman and charter school co-founder Tom Kaili-Inouye is challenging 2-term incumbent Kevin Beiser.
Wait, you need one of those?
At a campaign kickoff party, Kaili-Inouye said he'd bring business acuity to a district that has had to make deep budget cuts in recent years.
And the way to do that, in my view, is to bring qualified executive business experience that's proven over time. I have that. With an understanding of how to apply that in an educational environment successfully, I have that. And make tough choices. Hey!
That means being a tougher negotiator with staff unions. Home from a day of teaching middle school math, Beiser says he's helped balance San Diego Unified's budgets without increasing class sizes. And his work as a teacher makes him uniquely qualified.
I've really tried to focus on finding solutions at helping kids learn academically. And I think I have a proven track record of success. I mean, the #1 graduation rate in California, I think that speaks volumes.
That's #1 among large California districts. Like many, though, San Diego Unified will have to cut millions more dollars from its budget next year. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
You can now prepare for the election with the KPBS Voter's Guide. We have a link right on our homepage. It's a partnership with Voters Edge California. You'll find information on all of the races and candidates right now at kpbs.org.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, the scrutiny of Brett Kavanaugh expands beyond allegations of sexual assault to his honesty and temperament. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
One storm system moves through as another moves in. Aaron Calandra has details on the chances of rain in tonight's forecast.
Hello, thank you for joining us. I hope you had a wonderful day today. We will continue to track tropical rainstorm Rosa, and right now winds around 30 miles per hour. It is trekking to the northeast around 8 miles per hour, bringing some flooding rainfall to Arizona. Now, just the very far east of San Diego County, we are seeing a couple of showers popping up because of that, and you can see that here with the satellite and radar, but widespread things are drier. Here's the big picture. So we have all that moisture because of Rosa in Arizona, but to the north of us, we have a low pressure system that is cruising in off the Pacific. We're going to see rain across much of California because of that, and yes, we will get our share as well. For tonight, it's going to be mainly dry for everyone. Oceanside at 64. 64, Chula Vista 66, and in Mount Laguna at 51 degrees. And tonight in the metro, 70, partly cloudy conditions. And tomorrow we have that low pressure system coming on in, so we expect to see a beneficial rain. Everyone should get some kind of precipitation. It's good because we're still in a drought right along the coast in the interior areas, a severe drought, and then to the east, an extreme drought. So this rain is going to be helpful. I expect to see it tomorrow. Oceanside, 73 degrees with a couple of those showers. It's going to remain mainly dry in the deserts at 90. Mount Laguna will see some showers at 63. Chula Vista right around 75, and San Diego's at 74. That is a very average temperature for San Diego, 74, but it is going to become cooler. Behind that low pressure system, we have this cool breeze coming down from the north, so temperatures are going to drop. So expect to see those showers, maybe even a thunderstorm on Wednesday, and then drying out but becoming cooler. Still sunny for the rest of the week in those 70s. And inland, we'll see a couple of showers and storms Wednesday, a leftover shower or two Thursday. Temperatures drop down to 72 by Sunday. And in the mountains, a couple of showers and storms Wednesday, cooler and drier through Saturday, only in those low 60s, dropping to the 50s by Sunday with showers and storms, and staying dry in the deserts but cool in the 80s. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Back to you.
Even though we're seeing patches of rain this week, San Diego just recorded one of the driest years ever. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman found out what it means.
We had almost nothing.
Scripps Institution of Oceanography climate researcher Dan Cahan says recently we have not been getting any storms.
The water year, the period from October 1 to September 30, we got about 40% of our long-term average precipitation.
Cahan says the driest year on record was in 2002, when the county saw only a third of the rain it normally does.
We depend on just a few storms to generate most of our water supply, and if those storms don't track into the lower part of California, then we end up dry.
Cahan says there are early signs that San Diego could see an El Nino next year, which typically brings a lot of rain. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
The state is setting aside money to clean up communities impacted by wildfires. The focus is on Northern California, where the Carr Fire and other blazes destroyed homes near Redding. Major damage was also done to the landscape, and that's put water sources and fish habitats at risk.
We'll be working with those communities in Shasta County, City of Redding, Bella Vista, and others to make sure that they have secure drinking water sources, and to the extent we can, try to keep the receiving waters as clean as we can through these funds that we're going to be making available.
The State Water Board met today to authorize funds for wildfire recovery projects. The money will be used to stabilize the steep terrain and pay for new water filtration systems. With the start of October, we're reminded that some of San Diego's most devastating wildfires have happened in this month. CAL FIRE numbers show that more than a dozen of the state's most destructive wildfires have started October 1st or later. Still, first responders say, in reality, fire season is year-round. The San Diego County Office of Emergency Services is encouraging people to register their cell phones for Alerts San Diego to get up-to-the-minute information during emergencies.
October has always been a big wildfire focus for San Diego County. The first two really large wildfires we've had in 2003 and 2007, each one around 250,000 acres were burned. Those were eye-openers for us. In the decades since those fires, we've done a lot of planning, a lot of work to get us better prepared.
Tomorrow we'll have more on what OES officials say every San Diegan should do to get ready in case of a wildfire. And to register your cell phone for Alert San Diego, go to readysandiego.org/Alert San Diego. In an effort to fight climate change, the state is taking some new steps to support cleaner transportation. Capitol Public Radio's Ezra David Romero has the story.
The board decided to uphold the state's vehicle emission standards and to strengthen guidelines for cutting carbon pollution from vehicles. It's California's latest move against the Trump administration's desire to weaken fuel mileage standards. Last week, the board clarified that automakers must comply with state rules if they want to sell here. They also doubled the reduction of carbon intensity in fuel by 2030.
The low carbon fuel standard is for cleaning up the fuels. You have to reduce the total emissions now by 20%.
A hearing was also held on transitioning bus fleets to run entirely on electricity or hydrogen by 2040. A second hearing is slated for January. In Sacramento, I'm Ezra David Romero.
Now here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. Coming up on Morning Edition, counting down to election night, the role the NRA is trying to play in midterm races. And on Midday Edition, the mission and future of a Balboa Park institution, the group of volunteers who are bringing in a new exhibit. That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.